Get into our study this morning. We're in Leviticus, beginning at chapter 16. We spent, in last time we spent an hour and 27 minutes up to verse 19 in chapter 15, and we made it through from 19 to 32 in 3 minutes. So we could work right through all those discharges and all those things that nobody ever wants to talk about. And so what I say to that is, whew, glad that's over. But now we come into something really significant. As we look at the Messiah in Leviticus, we begin to understand very clearly that God set up this system of purification, this system of understanding of clean and unclean, this system for sacrifice, so that we could come to the ultimate sacrifice. And we have spent a great deal of time understanding guilt offerings and fellowship offerings and sin offerings and the difference of sins against God and sins against man and fellowship with God and peace offerings and what this is all about and what the priest can share in and what he can't share in, what belongs to God, what belongs to the priest, the division and how it's supposed to be done, and cleanliness and washing yourself and the laver and the purification and what must be done for both the intentional and the unintentional. And an understanding that I can sin against you and not know it. I can sin against the Lord and not know it. Okay? I can be doing things to the best of my knowledge, to my limited knowledge, and we're reminded of Scripture that says all a man's ways seem right to him. Everything we do seems right to us, otherwise we wouldn't do it. How many of you get up every morning and say, I wonder what I can do wrong today. I'm not going to get out of bed till I can figure out what wrong I can do today. You don't do that. Or how can I sin against my fellow man? Or how can I sin against God? You don't have that intention. You don't come with that intention. But there's things you do in a response that draws upon experience or draws upon your life or draws upon your personality or your walk with the Lord that causes you to react or do things in a certain way. Of course, the obvious ones are theft and murder and adultery and slander and those kind of things. But there's many that we do that fall short of that. But God's economy, sin, and everything else is not. So, being righteous, all of our righteousness is like filthy rags before the Lord. All of us sin and fall short of the glory of God. We understand that. Not for condemnation. Remember, Yeshua didn't come to judge. He didn't come to condemn. He came to save. And so in this pattern that God gives us, He didn't come with a new system. It must have always been God's intention, always God's plan, that we would have access to a method in which we could wash clean so we could stand in the presence of God and be received. And so Leviticus gives us that pattern. It lays out for us the formula and the plan in which things were declared as being holy and clean, how our sins became covered. Important word, cover. We remember in the study of the tabernacle that what's called by many the mercy seat is not really a mercy seat at all. It's a covering. It's a kippur. It's a covering. It's the atonement seat. It's the covering. Not so much mercy was adjudicated from there, was it? If you take a look at it, it's pretty inappropriately named. It wasn't so much mercy that came from there. I'm not exactly sure how it got named mercy seat, because there was a great deal of punishment, accountability. There was a great deal of judgment which was passed from that place. But as we come into this understanding of what God's system was and His intent to keep the tabernacle, the sacrificial system, as a set-apart people, that there is an order to things and a pattern to things, He's given us this pattern. And so in 16 we see that the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron who died when they drew too close to the presence of the Lord. Now, is this a reminder? This is a reminder to us as to when this took place. It's a reminder to us that people who didn't do it the right way died. So it's a reminder again from a timeline, and this is a reminder to us. It establishes for us the parameters. He's not saying to Moses, hey, do you remember how I killed the two boys, your two nephews? Do you remember how there was 4 and now there's 2? It's not a reminder, it's a condemnation, but it's a reminder that something took place that now limited access. And we find out that He says, now the Lord said to Moses, tell your brother Aaron that he's not to come at will into the shrine behind the curtain, in front of the cover that is upon the ark, lest he die, for I appear in the cloud over the cover. So from a reference point, we understand that something happened that caused people to go in at will. See, access to the Holy of Holies, access to the inner sanctum, if you will, access to the altar, was supposed to be done a certain way, but the frequency had not been clearly established, so you could enter in. And now he says, no more. Because it had been defiled. And in that defilement, God says you can't, basically you can't be trusted. So I'm going to have to tighten things up a little bit. I'm going to have to establish parameters, and it's going to become something that's pretty serious. And you're going to have to do this in an order. Again, establishing an order, an order, an order, an order. And this is the way I want it done. Thus only shall Aaron enter the shrine with a bull of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. Now, if we know this process of the sins of the nation of Israel with 2 goats, what's happening here? Why does he have to prepare a bull, one for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering? Well, there's 2 things he has to do. He has to make atonement for himself, but he also has to sanctify the tabernacle. Well, how does the tabernacle get defiled? Things happen. Things are brought in there. Maybe the priest isn't completely clean. Maybe all this isn't exactly as it should be. But God wants a pattern that when this great atonement is made on this annual celebration, that everything is proper and in order and decency and order. Yes? Okay, your question, let me repeat the question. If God knew,
Why didn't he already have these orders established before all this happened?
why didn't God have the order established? All right, let me ask you a question. Have you have a credit card? Okay. When you signed up for the credit card, they gave you about this many pages behind that credit card, right?
Yes.
And in that terms and conditions, these are all the terms and conditions.
Right.
Did you read them all?
Well, no.
No. How many of you received that insert with all those terms and conditions and read them before you accepted that credit card? 1, 2, okay. So 3, okay, 3 out of 100 and some people. Okay, so let's say that roughly 3% read it, 97% don't. That's probably a pretty fair statement. So it comes time and you miss a payment and you get this charge in the mail and it's $35. And your credit limit's cut and your interest rate's been jacked up and you go, this is the most unfair, unreasonable thing. I mean, I've been with that company for 25 years. I've never missed a payment. I've never been late with that payment. And all of a sudden they're charging me $35 plus they jacked up my interest rate. And I call them up and say, look, I've been a good customer. And they say, but you accepted the terms and conditions. Well, just because I accepted them doesn't mean I read them. Sally, attorney. Sally, let's give Sally the attorney. Let's give her the microphone.
What I was actually going to comment on, usually you can hear me without the microphone. We have an issue that's just come up about Facebook and the fine print on Facebook. Because people get on Facebook and post everything and post pictures, and then when they get in litigation, it's now all discoverable and it comes back to haunt them. And they say, but it's just for social networking. And the next thing they know, it's all evidence in court. So I think that's the point. We're not paying attention, and then there's a consequence for not paying attention, and God just wanted to let us know very clearly what we were involved with, and what the rewards and consequences would be for our behavior.
There you go. When you raise your kids, you tell your kids about boundaries. Okay? I remember the conversation we had, Skylar and Amanda, in the car one day, and Skylar had said something, and Amanda said, well, Skylar, don't you remember, As you get older, you get more and more responsibilities, and the circle goes out. But when you do something wrong, the circle comes back in. Wow. Well, once again, she knew all the terms and conditions. She just didn't pay any attention to them herself. Point being is that, sure, God knew, absolutely knew, and said, be holy because I'm holy. He talked about holiness. He talked about cleanliness. He said, don't bring a strange fire. Don't do all these things. He made it very clear, but nobody paid attention. Nobody paid attention. And take a look at the pattern. And this is within the pattern. God said, I redeemed you out of Egypt with my right hand. And how soon did they forget? How long was Moses gone on the mountain before Aaron was encouraged to collect all the gold jewelry to make a calf? How long did it take? Well, he was gone 40 days and 40 nights, but at what point was it? Sometime during that. I mean, that's not a very long time. Here you were there for 430 years, 400 of them in slavery. No generation that left Egypt knew freedom. They only knew bondage. And yet they got out of town and they forgot. They completely forgot. So people tend to revert back to, and this is what it is in the Lord. If you watch what happens with a believer, and especially a new believer, and we talk about, you're a new creation, the old is gone, the new has come. You have to die to the old man, you got to die to the old self, you got to die to the old self. Well, that's really easy if you're isolated. But the minute you go back to work and everybody around you remembers you like the person you were last week, and they start to treat you like you were treated last week, or they remind you, well, why are you acting like that? What do you mean you can't go out for drinks with us? You went out for drinks with us last Friday. Well, something happened to me on Friday night, and I just can't do that anymore. Sure you can. Who told you you couldn't do that? Okay, so don't have 20 drinks, just have 10. Right? You can still go. Why? They told you you couldn't. And so people try to pull you back, pull you back, pull you back, pull you back. And when circumstances get difficult, we revert back to what brought us comfort. Look, they even have foods that they call them comfort foods. Mashed potatoes, Reese's peanut butter cups, Reese's peanut butter cups, Reese's peanut butter cups. But we do that. We tend to go backwards. We tend to move back into a comfort zone. And so what happened is we see a people who were used to something. Remember, there was nothing left of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in them except for the blood. Moses comes along and says, we want to worship, we want to go out and do this. And so, look, Moses was 40 years in the house of Pharaoh. 40 years in the wilderness, not in the wilderness, but as a shepherd until Moses could get out of Moses. 80 years before God had refined him to the point where he was so far removed from all those things of his pride and his arrogance and his quick wit and his quick reaction time and all these things. 80 years to where he could finally, and then even during that time, even though he had tremendous favor with God, he still argued back and forth with God. We see that. But because he was a friend, God allowed him in this dialogue, in this discourse, to continue to challenge him and say, but I'm a slow speech. I'm this, and I'm not that, and are you sure you want me to do this? And who should I say sent me? And you really want me to do that? And, I don't have that kind of power. And the people are grumbling, and I can't do this on my own. I know you said I could do it, but, this was the pattern. This was the pattern of constantly challenging. And so we see again this pattern. I'm going to give you all this freedom, and here's my rules. Don't bring strange fire into my house. Don't come in without washing your hands. I want Aaron and the boys to keep the lamps lit all the time, okay? And they're going to trim the wicks, and they're going to do this stuff, and I want you to bring a male bull without defect, and I want you to do all these things. And they go, well, he's not going to know if there's a little defect. He's not going to know if there's this strange fire. He's not going to know. And bam, says, all right, I told you once. See, we're in the habit of understanding, oh, well, I told you, okay, I'm going to count to 3. How about if I just count to 1? Oh, we're so used to if I told you once, I told you 1,000 times, and we're okay with that. Haven't I told you not to do that? But there's still no consequence. There's no consequence. In God's economy, there's instantaneous consequence. One step over the line is over the line. God didn't keep moving the line. He didn't keep moving the boundary stones. As a matter of fact, He gives us very clear instruction, do not move the boundary stones. He says, do not move the boundary stones. And so in His economy and His reference points, things are, God says what He means, and He means what He says. Oh, we're used to theology. We're used to, well, He didn't really mean that. See, there's a lot of grace now, and in this grace we have. Oh, okay, I'll give you grace. Don't look at a woman with lust in your heart or you committed adultery. You broke one of the top 10. Don't think, or you broke it. Calling your brother a fool and being angry with him is murder. That's New Covenant definition of sin. That's New Covenant definition of commandment. When you don't esteem your brother more than yourself, you violate one of Yeshua's commandments. These weren't please and thank yous. These weren't, oh, if you feel like it, ma'am and sir. It was, if you do this, then you love me. If you don't do this, you don't. These requirements of the New Covenant, these standards of New Covenant life were much more severe. And so God's trying to establish for us that this is what being set apart means. This is holiness. Holiness means that you do what you're asked to do, instantaneous execution, not blind, because He gave us clean understanding. He said, you'll defile my temple if you do this. You'll defile this if you do this. You'll put in jeopardy my relationship with you. I'm going to be there. I'm going to go ahead of you. I'm going to prepare the way. I'm going to go by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. I'm going to constantly keep myself in your sight. Keep your eyes on me. Keep your eyes on me. Just don't take your eyes off of me. And I'll lead you. So those that are the proponents of, well, Moses was just an aimless wanderer in the desert. Didn't God go before him the whole way? Didn't He lead him the whole way? So what kind of aimless wandering is that? If you're following God now, you're an aimless wanderer? I don't think so. I don't think so. And so when God prepares the way and He establishes a standard, He says, do this. Yes, something as simple as speak to the rock. Speak to the rock. But in His pattern, because he fell back and it was very clear, speak to the rock, He struck the rock. That broke God's instruction. That went against God. Now, in the natural, we see that Moses did not enter the Promised Land. But we also see this great hope because there he was on the Mount of Transfiguration, standing there with Elijah and Yeshua. So we know that he entered the Promised Land, don't we? We know that in the higher level, in a glorified body, there was Moses. What city were they in? Outside Jerusalem, in the Promised Land. So we know that God can fulfill all of this in His way. And He's giving us patterns of obedience, patterns of being set apart. Yes, it's hard to meet the requirements of. That's why it's so important to have Yeshua. Because otherwise, I can't meet the requirements of. I think that I'm being obedient because I got water out of the rock, because I look at the result and not the process. Because the end justifies the means. And God's showing us this pattern that the end doesn't justify the means. It's the means. You be faithful with the little things. Do it my way. Do it the way I instruct you to do, and then all this will be given unto you. Seek me first. Seek me first. And so it's a pattern that He gives us. And so sure He knew. Sure He knew. I believe in my heart of hearts that it's always God's belief that He's going to find the best in man. But not one. Not one. But Yeshua. And so if we're going to really appreciate Yeshua, we have to look at the standard of Yeshua, and then we have to look at the pattern that He did all this. He redeemed us out of bondage. He did all these things for us. He provided us food. He provided us clothing. He provided us shelter. He provided shoes on our feet. And yet we still didn't appreciate it. It wasn't until He died for us. And then 6.5 billion people in the world, only 1.5 billion believe in him. Still, even with that, we're still fighting to preach the gospel, fighting to deliver the message out there of how good God is. And people still think, Jim, I got a ring up here. People still think that they can do it on their own. And the truth of the matter is we can't. As much as we have the opportunity to do it on our own, God's called us to be set apart and conform no longer to the patterns of the world and the world's standard of things, but God's standard of things. And He gives us this. And when we see how difficult it is, how subtle some of these requirements are, we understand how profound it is that Yeshua was able to do all of this for us. That even in this limited thing, even in this limited set of requirements, we have to begin to understand this pattern, how difficult it is to meet the standards. And that one did that for us. And so when we take a look at this, thus only shall Aaron enter the shrine with a bull of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall be dressed in a sacral linen tunic with linen breeches next to his flesh, and be girt with a linen sash, and he shall wear a linen turban. These are the sacral vestments. He shall bathe his body in water and then put them on. He's got to clean himself. He's got to wash the world out. What is the dirt? Got to remember, man's made out of dirt, right? God made us out of the dust of the earth. In order for him to wash man off of him, the world off of him, he has to wash his entire body, and then things which are dedicated, washed and cleansed and dedicated to the Lord, so there's nothing of man on him when he comes into the presence of God. When he performs these duties, he can't perform them as man, he has to perform them as a high priest. And now we have one man, one high priest, and now we've determined that only once a year can this one man perform these duties, and he has to do it clean. He can't have any man on him, and that's a pretty difficult requirement. And from the Israelite community, he should take two he-goats for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. Aaron is to offer his own bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and for his household. So even the high priest can sin? Sure, the high priest can sin. Can there be sin in his house? Sure, there can be sin in his house. He has to make atonement for the sin. He's got to bring in a sacrifice out of his own flock, out of his own herd. So he has to cleanse the tabernacle. He has to cleanse himself. All this has to be done before he can make atonement for the people. It's a process. Isn't it interesting that it's three? It's a three-step process. Three-step process. Three, all the way through. It's threes. Aaron is to offer his own bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and for his household. He shall take the two he-goats and let them stand before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and he shall place lots upon the two goats, one marked for the Lord and the other marked for Azazel. Now, what was Azazel? Azazel are the cliffs out in the desert. Now, remember, we have to stop thinking about the natural and think about the time 2,000, 4,000 years ago. What's roaming the deserts? What kind of animals are roaming those deserts? Lions, wolves. We've got all kinds of wild animals. So a helpless goat out there in the middle of the desert, what's going to happen to him? Either he's going to wander off in the dark and fall off the cliff, or he's going to be consumed. But he's going to disappear. And God gives us this pattern that our sins are being taken away. Once a year, all the sins of the people are being taken away. So if during the course of the year I'm making sacrifices on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, what's happening to my sins? They're being covered. And so we understand this kippur, this covering. Why do I wear something on my head called a kippah? It's a kippur. It is a proclamation to the world that I acknowledge that God is my covering. If I wore the lid to the Ark of the Covenant on my head and acknowledge that God is my covering, you'd say, well, that's, the people in Wisconsin wear a big piece of cheese. All right? You know they're from Wisconsin by the cheese on their head, right? Anybody start quoting scriptures to them? Right? There he is. Okay. Right? Does anybody say anything about the cheeseheads? No, but when God's your covering, everybody has a comment about it. Okay? But this is the acknowledgement. You wear a kippah, you acknowledge that God is your covering.
For the temple, I hate this. Did he not, I'm sure he knew that Adam and Eve's sin was going to happen, correct? I mean, he...
So are you saying that God wasn't surprised?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that...
Well, I'm going to take a quick regress back to Genesis for just a minute. Okay? If you look at the book of Genesis is a book of separation. It's a pattern of separation. God separated everything, including the ultimate separation, which was man from God. He gives us this path of return. If I provide you with everything, even Yeshua said, if you love me, do these things. Okay? Because there were requirements. Okay? So if God provides, if your kid never leaves home, because you provide for his clothing and for his shelter and you give him money and you take care of everything, how do you know your kid really loves you? Or is he just there because of the provision? Or is he just, what's that? You've wondered that yourself. But that's exactly it. So if we leave and we return, you remember that old, and I quote this all the time, that, if you love something, let it go. If it comes back to you, it really loved you. If it doesn't, it didn't. Well, this is the pattern for God. I mean, these poems and these cute sayings don't come up because of anything more than everything has. There's nothing new under the sun. King Solomon said that. Okay, and that's true. So if we look at this pattern that God had to let us go, He had to let us go on to lean on our own understanding, our own devices in order to recognize Him. Then when we return, how do we say this prayer? We ask Yeshua into our hearts. We put our faith in Him, and so we want to walk with Him at all times. It's that fellowship, it's that relationship. And so we have to leave, all of us. That's why you hear me say quite often, you can't be born a believer. You just can't be born a believer. You have to come to a decision in life. You have to come to the point of decision in your life. So can I do that at 2 years old? Okay? Yeah, I don't think so. Okay? To have complete understanding, okay, you have to do it at an age of accountability. So if what if I accept them at 8? Okay, well, we have 6-year-olds back there, 7 years old back there that can quote you scripture and really understand, that can explain it to you, then I'm on board with it. Okay? But it's a decision you have to make.
Going to be tempted and that they were going to succumb to that. And
I don't think anything surprised God if God's all-knowing, all-powerful in His entire creation. As a matter of fact, when you take a look in the book of Revelation at the restoration of all this, what do you see there? You see the tree of life and Nathan.
It says in Revelation 13:8, He was the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So He knew.
He knew all of this. He knew that his only pattern would be that He would give man every opportunity. Why? Because this whole concept of set apart, this whole concept of holiness, this whole concept of reverence, this whole concept of standing with God, if every path led to God, if you could do whatever you wanted, if you could murder, if you could steal, if you could lie, you could be covetous, you could do whatever you wanted and still get to heaven, what benefit is there in heaven?
Everything, I think it is that we learn by our own mistakes, and He wants us to see our mistakes. We learn by that experience.
Absolutely.
So by seeing that, then we know how much we need Him.
If everybody could get into heaven, wouldn't heaven just be earth?
idea was that we would fall from grace only to return to grace?
You tell me.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
You read the Bible?
Yeah, I've read
Yeah,
the
the
Bible.
Bible. The Bible
But you
clearly
see, this
shows
is-
me that there's one book about us leaving, and there's 65 books on how to get back.
So that was the whole thing.
Well, he wants us to choose him and have a relationship with him.
Choose him. Choose him. He chose you before you chose him.
Right.
But it's a two-part. He chose you, but then you have to complete this. Okay? Let me talk to my lawyer friend for just a minute. Can I have a contract involving one party?
Got to shake hands, unless it's God. He can walk through.
Okay? Say this again.
We have to shake hands. God can walk through an independently covenant as he did, but if we have to join the hand to complete that deal.
Where's the absolute pattern given to us? The absolute pattern is given to us in Genesis. Prior to circumcision, God confirmed his covenant with Abraham by doing what? Abraham, cut these animals in half, and I will walk through them to what? To confirm my covenant with you. Now, for you to confirm your covenant with me, you got to do this. Okay? Now, when a couple walks down the aisle, what do? They walk down the aisle separately. When they come back up the aisle, they walk between two families, don't they? Don't they usually walk between, if you have a church or a synagogue with the center aisle, they walk between the two families, okay? No longer belonging to this one, no longer belonging to this one. They're walking through together because they're confirming their covenant with each other. And as they pass through the divided families, they're saying, we don't belong to you anymore. We don't belong to you anymore. We belong to each other. For this reason, a man will leave his mother and his father and will cleave to his wife, and they shall become one, and their covenant is confirmed. In order to have this covenant, there must be a leaving and a returning. There must be a leaving and cleaving. When you leave the Lord, you come into this world, you don't know right from wrong, you learn these things, but you have to make this decision that I want to cleave myself to God and we shall become one. Why do you ask Yeshua into your heart? This is the temple, this is the tabernacle, and you and the Lord become one. And now you no longer do anything by yourself. It's God's calling you to say, I don't want you to do more for me, I want you to do more with me. I want to be a part of your life. I want to be a part of every thought. I want to be a part of everything you do. The only way I can do that is to become one with you, to come take up residence in your heart. Well, what do you have to do in order to do that? You have to create a humble place. You have to create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. Right? Okay? Well, what's that clean heart? That clean heart is when I go ahead and I sacrifice the bull and I wash and I put on the clean linen and I do all these things just in the pattern of the tabernacle, just in the pattern of Leviticus. I do all these things to prepare myself a clean heart and renew a what? A right spirit. Well, there's only one right spirit. What is that right spirit? The Holy Spirit. And renew a right spirit within me. Okay? This is, I've left, I've strayed. Okay? All of us leave. All of us leave. All of us leave. We're born into a life where the pattern, it's in the blood. The life of a thing is in the blood. How do we know? Because the blood cried out from the ground. Hey, why do you ask me about my brother? Because his blood cried out from the ground. Why don't Jewish people traditionally embalm? Because the life of a thing is in the blood. If you don't have the life blood, you can't resurrect. Can't resurrect without the lifeblood. That's the Jewish thought. All right, so Aaron is to offer his bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and his household. He shall take the 2 he-goats and let them stand before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. He shall place lots upon the 2 goats, one marked for the Lord and the other marked for Azazel. Aaron shall bring forward the goat designated by lot for the Lord, which he is to offer as a sin offering, while the goat designated by lot for Azazel should be left standing alive before the Lord to make expiation with it and to send it off to the wilderness for Azazel. Scapegoat. What is that short for? Escape. He's the escape goat. Okay? One's going to get burned on the altar. The other one is going to be sent out to the desert. Why? So it will disappear, so our sins will be taken away. Yeshua had to be both. Correct? He had to be taken away. He had to go away. Didn't he go away? How many days was he gone? 3 days. Okay, he was gone, but he returned. And when he returned, did he return in what form? Okay, he was raised from the dead. Okay? Sins washed away, Okay? Still his hands were pierced, weren't they? Okay? Side was pierced, right? And he had to shed blood. Why did he have to shed blood?
Without shedding of blood is no remission of sin.
Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. Why did blood and water come from his side? Because at the same time he was pierced, the blood and water were being poured out from the altar of the Lord, where the sacrifice for Passover was being made, where the lambs were being slaughtered. Because there was so much blood on that day, 250,000 lambs on the altar. So much blood, so thick with blood that the priest, the rabbis had to take and pour water. And as you looked, and the water and blood were washing down into the Kidron Valley. At the same time, water and blood were pouring out of the temple. Water and blood were pouring out of the side of Yeshua. It's a beautiful picture. The confirmation that he was the Lamb of God, the sole, individual, one Lamb of God. The sum total of all the lambs were contained in him. It's the reason why you can celebrate the communion with the blood and the body, because it takes you back in time to Exodus chapter 12 as you consume, because you had to eat the entirety of the offering.
His blood was poured out in the heavenly temple at the same time. He poured it out himself.
Poured it out. Aaron shall then offer his bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and his household. He shall slaughter his bull of sin offering, and he shall take a pan full of glowing coals, scoop from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of finely ground aromatic incense, and bring this behind the curtain. So now we see a great profound statement. He has to bring it behind the curtain. One time a year, one man can go behind the curtain. When Yeshua breathed his last, what happened? Rent in two. And what words did Yeshua speak? It is finished. When Yeshua died, when Yeshua was crucified, when Yeshua's life was given up, he completed this process. This process wasn't set aside. This process was fulfilled. When he said, I didn't come to abolish the law of the prophets, but I came to fulfill. God wasn't, don't we have a high priest? Died once for our sins? Isn't this the same pattern? God's showing us what's going to take place. He says you have to do this annually. And this is for the national forgiveness of all the people. You see, there's only one day in which all of Israel can be saved. It's the Day of Atonement. When we look at the pattern of Leviticus 23 and the feast days that God gives us, he says on the first day of this month, on the first day of the 7th month, we're going to have this celebration. The trumpets are going to blast. Well, don't we read that Yeshua is going to come back at the trumpet's call? My heart's desire, brother, is that all of Israel will be saved. On that day when Jerusalem cries out, O Jerusalem, you will not see me again until you cry out, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Zechariah says that on that day when all the nations of the world come against Israel, then Jerusalem shall be restored. And on that day, we believe that all of Israel will be saved. Well, what day should that be? That should be the Day of Atonement, when there is already provision within God's system for the forgiveness of sin, not an annually renewable, but a permanent entrance into the book of life. Because remember, the tradition is during this period of time and this period from the first day to the 10th day, you have this process in which people call it the days of awe, when they're making reconciliation with each other. They're trying to fix things so that when they bring their gift to the Lord on this day, that they'll be received and that their names will be inscribed in the Lamb's Book of Life for another year. Because this is an annually renewable circumstance. So not only does he have to wash the tabernacle clean from anything that's offended, or, you know, if he can only go behind the curtain once a year, and they're in the desert, and they're packing this up and they're moving it, is the tabernacle going to get dirty? And we think it's going to get dusty. Is things going to get in there that we don't know nothing about? How many of you have locked up a room and gone back a year later? Is there dust in there? Is there stuff in there? Things happen, things you didn't know anything about. If you don't go in there but once a year, you may be surprised. So what's the first thing you probably do? You clean it. And this is that process of cleansing it, spiritually cleansing it. He shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, so that the cloud from the incense screen covers the cover that is over the ark of the pact, lest he die. Why? Because God's that cloud. God's in that cloud. No one can look upon the face of the Father and live. No one can look upon the glory of God and live. And so can we look upon the incarnate Yeshua and live? Yes, because He's not the Father. He and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. But no one can look upon the glory of the Father and live. And so there you are, you're there in the tabernacle, and now this glory cloud is there, the presence of God is there, but it's a cloud. Can you see in a cloud? Anybody ever been on a private plane? You fly into a cloud. Can't see a thing. If you're in a cloud, you cannot see a thing. Nothing. You can only see the instruments in front of you. You can't, you can see the glass for the windshield, but that's it. Other than that, it's can't see. There's no distinguishing of shapes or forms or anything. You could fly right into a building, a mountain. You just can't see a thing. And that was such a weird feeling. I never wanted to do it again. It was really odd. I mean, trust the instruments, trust the instruments, trust the instruments. I say, you know what? I trust the ground. I am not destined to fly a private plane. I took the lessons, I went it through and just said, you know what? This is not for me. Didn't like it. He shall then take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger over the cover on the east side. In front of the cover he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his fingers. How many times? 7 times. We see this pattern of 7 times. Naaman, go down and dip yourself in the river 7 times. We see this number of completion. We see this 7 times as being an important part of the process. He shall then slaughter the people's goat of sin offering, bring its blood behind the curtain, and do with its blood as he has done with the blood of the bull. He shall sprinkle it over the cover and in front of the cover. So he shall then slaughter the people's goat of sin offering, bring its blood behind the curtain. But now the curtain's rent in two. Yeshua's died, the curtain's rent in two. That means that something must have had happened. Something must have happened in order to complete this process. It's Yeshua's blood that completed the process. It wasn't set aside. It wasn't a new method. It wasn't a new system. It was the completion of the system that God had already established in the Torah from the beginning as to how to make atonement for sin. And so when we superimpose Yeshua over this pattern, we see that He was the absolute fulfillment. And He died for the salvation of all of Israel. But even more than that, behold the Lamb of God who comes to take away the sin of the world. Anyone who, for God sent His only begotten Son, that whoever believed in Him would not perish, but would have eternal life. He was the salvation for the whole world. Now, when you see the profound nature of this, only one can come in once a year. But now one came in for everybody. And we can come into His presence any time we want, as long as we want. We come into the presence of God covered by the blood of Yeshua. You can't come in on your own, can you? No one comes to the Father but through the Son. We don't pray to Yeshua. Does anybody here pray to Yeshua? Pray to the Father through the Son. Well, wait a second. We don't need an intermediary. We don't need an intercessor. Well, what was Aaron? If you didn't need an intercessor, why did you have Aaron, the high priest, who could only go in once a year? If you didn't need an intercessor, why was it just Moses that went up on the mountain? If you didn't need an intercessor, why did God call Abraham as one man to have a relationship with Him to save all the people? If you didn't need an intercessor, who was Noah? If you didn't need an intercessor, who were all the prophets that God spoke to as a messenger, as the Navaim that went out as a messenger of God, the voice of God, and said, "Thus says the Lord"? If everybody could hear his voice, if everybody had access, if everybody was on the same page and had a walking relationship with God, he would have talked to everybody. You wouldn't need an intercessor. But the truth of the matter is that's not the case. He always had a hierarchy, he always had a system, and he always chose one. And he establishes that pattern. He established it back with Abraham, he established it back with Noah, he established it back with Adam. And we've always had this pattern. Because people didn't want to do it. We always want to leave it up to somebody else. That was our nature. Leave it up to somebody else. Oh, you go learn those things. But is it laziness or is it an anointing? Is it a calling? People are called to different things. I've shared with you many times about the guy that does our trash in our neighborhood. He has an anointing. He has a sanitation collection anointing. Okay? And I don't know, Linda, if he does your neighborhood too, but if he comes on Tuesday and on Friday, every trash can on the street is lined up perfectly, symmetrically. You know he's been there because it's beautiful. And when you drive down the street and you look in your rearview mirror, both on the side of your mirrors, when you look, you see everything perfectly lined up. Hi, Miss Laura. The mortician we just met had an anointing. Knew from the time he was 6 years old that he wanted to be a mortician. This was a calling. There's calling. God gifts you. And if you take a look at the gifts of the Spirit, if you take a look at the giftings, God tells you some are prophets, some are teachers, some are this, some are that. You have giftings, you have fruit, you have all these different things. Some are eyes, some are ears, some are arms. Now, everybody can't be a nose. Everybody can't be an eye. I mean, he tells us about this body. He shows us very clearly all throughout the Scripture that there's various callings and various things, and some are called to be intercessors, and some are called to be priests, and some are called to be the ones to go before. Why was it Christopher Columbus or Magellan or all those explorers who wanted to go out and go to uncharted lands? Or what about the missionaries? Livingston, people that went into the deepest, darkest parts of the world to bring the gospel or to bring medicine or whatever it was that they brought. What was the passion? What was it burning within them to go out and do these things? It was an anointing from God. It was a calling on their life. What about all our veterans who were called to serve in the armed forces? I didn't serve in the armed forces. I wasn't called. I was in the lottery for the draft. I wasn't called. When we send our troops, what do they say? The word is, well, they're called up. Called up. Kind of an odd choice of words if it's not divinely inspired. This is a calling. And so when we understand this calling of intercessors, and we understand that God always chose one. And so when it comes to this natural understanding of who Yeshua was, he was the one. And just because the rabbinical thought has been, oh, no, anybody can do it, you don't need that anymore, or we have to wait for it to come, the truth of the matter is right here in Scripture, it shows us the one. And that pattern was given to us in Leviticus. He shall then slaughter the people's goat of sin offering, bring its blood behind the curtain, and do with its blood as he had done with the blood of the bull. He shall sprinkle it over the cover and in front of the cover. Thus he shall purge the shrine of the uncleanness and transgression of the Israelites, whatever their sins, and he shall do the same for the tent of meeting which abides with them in the midst of their uncleanness. When he goes in to make expiation of the shrine, nobody else shall be in the tent of meeting until he comes out. Why? Because anybody else who comes in brings their dirt and their filth in the world with them. And so now that you're clean, it's like a clean room. Anybody ever work in corporate America in computers and clean rooms, or in a laboratory environment where you have to go into a clean room? Okay? The air is clean. You go into a chamber. You're completely cleaned. You're washed. Your clothes have been washed, and then you go in there and you bring no contaminants into that room. No contaminants into the room. You're decontaminated before you go. And so this is that kind of decontamination. This is that same pattern. There's an outer chamber, you get cleansed, you get washed, and then nobody can go in behind you because then they bring their junk and they have to be washed and cleansed. So once you go in, nobody else can defile it. It's now been cleaned. So you clean it as you go through this process. And so it's clean, clean, clean. Now it's ready. And the door is closed. When he has made expiation for himself and his household and for the whole congregation of Israel, he should go out to the altar that's before the Lord and purge it. So you have to clean, clean, clean. Purge it. He shall take some of the blood of the bull and of the goat and apply it to each of the horns on the altar, and the rest of the blood he shall sprinkle on it with his finger 7 times. Then he shall cleanse it of uncleanness of the Israelites and consecrate it. When he has finished purging the shrine, the tent of meeting, and the altar, the live goat shall be brought forward. Aaron shall lay both his hands upon the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities and transgressions of the Israelites, whatever their sins, putting them on the head of the goat, and it shall be sent off to the wilderness through a designated man. Thus the goat shall carry on it all their iniquities to an inaccessible region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness. When the gospel was preached to me, the first time at Bethel, the first time I ever heard it in Jewish terms, of the Passover lamb, and the Levitical system was summarized and explained to me, and I completely understood this process, and I started to laugh. And I thought how willing I was to accept the fact that a priest that I didn't know could put my sins on a goat, and the goat could go out in the desert and I would be forgiven. But that a man sent by God couldn't take my sins upon himself and die, and I could be forgiven. So it was more reasonable, more believable, more credible that a goat could take my sins away. But yet we bought into it hook, line, and sinker. And for that period of time, that's exactly what it was. That was the system God established. Now, many of us don't do things the same way. As a matter of fact, how many of you remember sitting in your kitchens or your dens with a map? A big map that only some of you know how to fold. And taking a highlighter pen and looking at point A and point B and saying, hey, we're going to go on a family trip to Virginia. And look for the roads to get to Virginia, and take a ruler and measure out based on the legend and figure out at whatever the speed limit was, 55 miles an hour, and calculate for yourselves. But before AAA had the little travel wheel that told you the distance, okay? And you sat there and you had travel brochures, okay? And you didn't have the internet. And what you had was motel brochures that you sent off for, and you got them and you decided what places you would visit because you had brochures. You had various pamphlets, okay, laid out on the table, and you picked and chose, and you laid out your trip, and you sat there and you did that, right? And today's method is you get in your car, you turn your car on, and you may even speak the words. Take me to Virginia. And it might say to you, Aunt Virginia, Cousin Virginia, Virginia College, State of Virginia. It might give you all kinds of options because it has more intelligence than you and I had sitting at our kitchen tables. And I say, tell me where the closest gas station is. And it tells me where, and I say, take me there, and it takes me there. Well, our methods have changed, and do we rail against the method and say, no longer, do we not get there? I put it in my GPS, and it takes me to where I need to go. And I don't say that it's no longer valid. It's just a new and improved, and it's a better way. A better way. So this was the system God established, and then He gave us a better way. And no longer we sit at our kitchen tables. Yeah, it would be fun to plan it that way. I think it would be fun now as a retro experience with the family. Okay, let's go back to the way we used to do it. Let's mail off to AAA and see if we can get and I remember trip tickets. You used to get these little things with the little plastic on the top, and they'd map out for you, and they would do all that work because they had all the fun of sitting around the office. And they had people to do that at AAA. And wouldn't that be fun to do it that way today? Or you just go online and you click and say, plan this trip. Or you actually do it even easier. You pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, you do it. A new and better way. And we have all kinds of new and better ways. And we don't say that the new and better way, because it replaced the old, is no longer valid. We say it's a new and better way of accomplishing the same thing. Well, God, in His infinite wisdom and His infinite progression, gives us a new and better way through Yeshua. But had we never sat at our kitchen table, had we never gone through that exercise to see the improvements that have been made, the leaps and bounds made, we'd have no appreciation for it, would we? And this is where we've gotten. We've taken this gift of salvation of what Yeshua gave to us, and we've become so complacent and so casual about it that this is the way. We don't understand how complex and how difficult it was to experience what it was like, and this is why we study the Torah. It's why we study it the way we study it, so we would gain such great appreciation that we, who are called to a higher level of reverence and a higher level of holiness and a higher level of appreciation in our walk with the Lord, would know how much, how punitive, how complex, how almost unobtainable it was under the old system. To have a new and exciting appreciation for what Yeshua did, the price that He paid, and what we have access to, because you see, this is just the old covenant. We have access to every bit of this because of His price. We have access to every bit of it. We have access to the same kind of relationship with God that the prophets had, where God can speak to us and through us. But that was a price that was paid. And so to have an understanding, a deep understanding of this system and say, well, this is so complex, this is so difficult. Yes, it's complex and difficult, but Yeshua paid that price as a new and better way. As a new and better way. Thus the goats shall carry on all their iniquities to an inaccessible region, and the goats shall be set free in the wilderness. And Aaron shall go into the tent of meeting, take off the linen vestments that he put on when he entered the shrine, and leave them there. He shall bathe his body in water in a holy precinct and put on his vestments. Then he shall come out and offer his burnt offering and the burnt offering of the people, making expiation for himself and for the people. The fat of the sin offering he shall turn into smoke on the altar. Why? Because he just took the sins of the people and put them on the goat. He's filthy. He now has to go through this process of taking off the dirty garments, washing himself, and then leaving them behind, because if he doesn't leave them behind, he just carries them right back out. How many times must you wash your hands for them to be clean? Well, every time you touch something dirty, you have to wash your hands in order to be clean. Dr. Rick Smith, you're a dentist. You wash your hands before you put your hands in somebody's mouth, and then you wash your hands after you put them in their mouth, right? I hope you do. Dr. Rick. Right, but how many times on the same patient might you wash your hands? Do you wash your hands more than once? What? Every time you're in and out. In the room, out of the room. In the room, out of the room. In the room, out of the room. There you go. Is that the pattern? Were you taught that? Why? Yeah, why do you do that? Right, cross-infection. You don't want to cross-pollute. You don't want to pollute your instruments. You don't want to take what was in their mouth and put it on your instruments. You go in. You have clean hands to go in. Once you go in, are your hands still clean? Your hands are not clean. They're now defiled and dirty. So when you come out before you touch something else, you're getting excited now. My pen's excited. So in this whole process of in and out, you become clean, defiled, clean, defiled, clean, defiled, clean, defiled. This is what the priest does. Every time he goes in and out, he's got to wash. He's got to, because he's clean, he's defiled. He's clean, he's defiled. He's got to go through this process. He's taking the sins of the people on him. You put it on the goat. If you touch a goat, are you going to go wash your hands? Come on, it's only reasonable. So the person, he who set the Azazel goat free, shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water. After that, he may re-enter the camp. So he takes all the sins of the people out. He's the one that escorts the goat out to the place. How does he do that? He walks the goat. He takes the goat, or he carries the goat. He transports the goat. All the sins of the people, all this filth is on him. He's got to wash before he can come back in. It's a very logical process, a very logical process, a very logical process. How does God do it today? Confess your sins one to another Confess your sins to the Lord daily. Daily. Get washed every time. If you go out in the world, you get something on you. You turn on your computer and a pornographic site comes up and you look. You need to get washed. You need to do these things. You go into a place of defilement. You need to wash yourself. You need to be cleansed. How do you do that? Through your relationship with the washing of the Word. You stay in the Word. You stay in confession with God. You continue to go to Him. You humble yourself before God, and He'll wash you clean. He'll continue to wash you clean. Every time you get dirty, He wants you to wash yourself with the Word of God. It's a process. He established it here, and He says if you do that, you'll be clean. You don't have to worry. You don't have to go through this process of, well, am I really saved? Or, am I doing the right things? You just continue to do it in the pattern God gives us. He gives us these patterns. Now, does everybody who reads the Bible know about these patterns? Yes. How many of them do it? This is to your question. Did God not know? This is to your question. Didn't people know what they were supposed to do? Sure they did, but they didn't read. And if they read it, they forgot it. If they read it, they didn't do it. But this is supposed to be a daily walk with the Lord. And yes, Kim. Hold that thought for just 1 minute. Captain Sterling is racing across the room.
It makes me think of being in the world but not of the world, and dying daily and bowing our hearts down to be cleaned every day, to go back out in the world and cleaning the gunk off again every day.
That's it. How many of you can jump in a swimming pool and not get wet? You can't do it. Even if you're covered, you can do it up to a depth, but you have to be completely covered. It's the same way of, can you go into the world and not get some of the world on you? You can't. You cannot do that. You're going to get something on you. Hal?
Because we're in the world.
Go ahead and repeat that for everybody, please.
It's helped me to compare that to needing a shower every day. We don't feel guilty about taking a shower because you walk through the world, but we feel like, we feel guilty about needing to be clean spiritually, but it's the same thing.
It's exactly the same thing. How many of you would go work out and then put on clean clothes without washing? Doesn't make sense, does it? Doesn't make sense. Nathan?
Yeshua says in John 15:3, now you are clean through the word that I have spoken to you. So we need a cleansing every day. We need to read this word every day to be clean.
Yeshua said, when you pray, how are you to pray? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in. Give us this day, not this week, this month, this year, give us this day our daily bread. Daily bread. That was the manna. That was the word. All right? Okay, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Okay? And forgive us our trespasses. So we need to be washed as we wash others, as we release, as we do this cleansing, this purging. This is all part of cleansing and purging ourselves. When the word says, don't let the sun go down on your anger, lest the enemy get a foothold. If you wake up angry, okay, are you going to be able to go to the Lord and say, give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others their trespasses? No. It's a daily process. This whole relationship with God is one day at a time. Why? How many days does He give you? At a time. He doesn't give you a whole day, does He? He gave you that breath, and then He gave you that breath, and then He gave you that breath. And we're supposed to be thankful for every breath we get. And then what are we going to do with it? He said, while you wait for the return of the Lord, commit yourself to do these things. Teach people, raise up disciples, train people up in the Word, teach them the Word, preach the gospel, go out and make disciples of men. Preach the good news. Don't be sitting idly around when the master comes home. He wants to find you at work. You don't know the time of his arrival. This is what he wants you to do. He wants you busy about just like Yeshua was busy about the Father's get in us at age 13 when he was sitting in the sanctuary after Passover. Why are you looking for me? I'm about my Father's business. This is what he wants us to be, is about his business. So the bull of sin offering, the goat of sin offering, whose blood was brought in to purge the shrine, shall be taken outside the camp, and their hides, flesh, and dung shall be consumed in fire. He who burned them shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water. After that he may re-enter the camp. So again, the purging. These skins are not to be used. Not to be used. Okay? Are these kosher skins? They are. What is our Torah made of? A kosher skin. So it can't be clean. If it's been used to make a sacrifice for sin, the whole thing has to be consumed in the fire. The offering in the camp, the rest of it, its hide and the entrails, the filthy parts, outside the camp. And whoever burns them outside the camp must take off his clothes, wash himself, lest he bring those sins back in. Wasn't that interesting that these are these literal or are these symbolic? The sins of the people. When I say that I put the sins of the people on this table, do they represent the sins of the people? Are they the actual sins of the people? Are they specific sins of the people? Or is this transference? That in God's economy we can transfer our sin onto something or someone, and they can become the substitute. Where do we understand that? Where does that first occur? Where does the substitute first come in? It comes in Genesis. As God speaks to Abraham in the Akedah and the binding of Isaac and says to him, take your son and sacrifice him on this altar. And they're going up and he says, well, Dad, the fire's here and the knife is here and all this stuff is here, but where's the sacrifice? He said, God will provide. God will provide. And we see this substitute, that God will provide a substitute. God will provide a substitute. So we see that the substitute is introduced. It's introduced there, and now it's introduced here, that there's a goat, and there's a bull, and there's a dove, and there's a pigeon, and there's a lamb, and there's a he-goat, and a she-goat, and there's a cow, and there's a bull, and there's all these things that are all substitutes. They're all substitutes for us to be able to transfer our sin onto them, and they can make expiation. They can make atonement for us. Did I just lose my... No? It's interesting that it never says, without the shedding of our blood, there is no remission for sin. Does it say that, Nathan? No, sir. Does it say, without the shedding of your blood, there's no remission of sin? Do I have to pierce you? Without the shedding of blood. That means blood is the covering. Blood is the kippur. Blood is the atonement for us. Well, God introduces it slowly because in our minds we have a really hard time thinking through this. So he starts out with a pigeon. Okay, we can think, okay, sacrifice a bird for me. Okay, sacrifice a lamb for me. Sacrifice a cow for me. Sacrifice a bull for me. Sacrifice a man for me. Oh, blood's blood. What about people for the ethical treatment of people? What about the human society? All right, well, we don't do human sacrifices, so we don't need a human society, do we? We don't need the people for the ethical treatment of people. It's for the ethical treatment of animals. But God set up the system so we would understand that the life of a thing is in its blood. That means anything. Man, animal, that their life is in their blood, the lifeblood. And so without the shedding of lifeblood. So can I just cut the finger? That's not lifeblood, right? That's capillaries and veins. That's not artery. That's not that lifeblood that we're talking about. So he who burned them shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water. After that he may re-enter the camp. And this shall be to you a law for all time. So how long is that? Has this law been set aside and broken? It is not. There's nowhere in the sacrifice of Yeshua and the death of Yeshua was this not fulfilled. Every aspect of it was fulfilled. The shedding of blood, the cleansing, the examination, the preparation, everything that was done in accordance. Everything that was done in the fulfillment of the Levitical code. It's important to notice. He said, in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall practice self-denial. How do we celebrate that today? We fast. And you shall do no manner of work, neither the citizen nor the alien who resides among you. So is that Jew and Gentile? Oh, how interesting. That's Jew and Gentile, the alien living among you. Isn't that interesting? And this is to be a Sabbath. So are there just 52 Shabbats in the year? There's not. There are days in God's calendar and God's appointed times. Remember, these are not the Jewish holidays. If they were the Jewish holidays, they wouldn't apply to the alien living among you, would they? And so when we're introduced in the end during the millennial reign, that at the beginning of the millennial reign, what will happen is that everybody, Jew and Gentile, Egyptian specifically, will have to make pilgrimage, the Moedim, the 3 appointed times, the regalim, the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 appointed times, at the first being that everyone will have to comply with, not optional, comply with, will be the Feast of Tabernacles. And anybody who doesn't is going to be cut off. How interesting that is. How interesting that is. And so God wants us to get this, that this hasn't been set aside. And so we do celebrate the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. We do celebrate it here at Beth Hillel. How do we celebrate it? Do we celebrate it with wailing and gnashing of teeth and ashes and sackcloth? No. It's a celebration. It's a celebration that our atonement's been made, but yet we intercede. We do a day of fasting, don't we? We call for a fast. All right? How many remember what we called for a 21-day fast? Do you remember that one? What was that a fast against? Criticism fast. That was my favorite. I like that. We're going to do that every year. We had a 21-day criticism fast. You had to go 21 days without criticism. How many of you had succeeded? Well, next year I hope that at least one of you will succeed. 21 days without saying a negative critical word to somebody. That's hard, isn't it? You found out how hard it is and how much we criticize and how much we tend to, and so when we talk about all these grumbling, complaining Israelites, these Hebrew people, oh, couldn't they just appreciate what God did for them? Well, you who live in a nice house and have nice clothes and get a nice paycheck and live the good life couldn't go 21 days, let alone 40 years, without grumbling and complaining. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Maybe we'll try a 7-day fast and see how you do with that. For on this day atonement shall be made for you to cleanse you of all your sins. You shall be clean before the Lord. It shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for you, and you shall practice self-denial. It's a law for all time. Now help me understand this. If God says everlasting, if He says for all time, does He mean until the time of Yeshua, or does He mean it for all time? Are these conditional requirements? Are these conditional upon on the Messiah coming? They're not. These are for all time. The priest who has been anointed and ordained to serve as priest in place of his father shall make expiation. Wow. Anybody have a more clearer picture of Yeshua? The priest who has been anointed and ordained to serve as priest in place of his father. Why these words? Why these words in Leviticus? Because he who comes in place of his father shall make expiation for the sins of the people. Can you see a more clear picture of the Son? Does this not say that the Son will make atonement for the people? Is this not right here in Leviticus? Oh, you mean the Gospels and the Torah? Yeshua's in the Torah? Well, here's the explanation. Here's the exact words. This is the literal translation of the Hebrew. This is from the Tanakh. This isn't the NIV. This is the JPS, the Jewish Publication Society Tanakh, the agreed-upon translation that many, not everybody, because no one in the Jewish community can agree on anything or on everything, but a very well-accepted translation of the Hebrew says, the priest who has been anointed and ordained to serve as priest in place of his father shall make expiation. That means one. So Aaron had how many sons? 4. 2 died. That left 2. Okay, did both of them take the place of their father, or was there an order to things? There was an order to things. Was there always an order to things? There was. Okay, did it usually go to the firstborn son of the firstborn son of the firstborn son of the firstborn son? It did, and that was a pattern. It was a pattern. He shall put on the linen vestments, the sacred vestments. He shall purge the innermost shrine. He shall purge the tent of meeting and the altar, and he shall make expiation for the priests and for all the people of the congregation. This shall be to you a law for all time, to make atonement for the Israelites for all their sins once a year. And Moses did as the Lord had commanded him. This is to be a law for all time, that this was to be done. And so Yeshua did that. It's exactly what Yeshua did. In this pattern, in this order, in this way. And so we've hit our 11:58 hour. And we need to close so that Deborah Jemison, raise your hand. Hi, Miss Deborah. How do you say